academia has kind of a weird leadership structure. So you're employed by your advisor, so you kind of have to do whatever your advisor tells you to do because you're getting paid by them. But at the same time, you're kind of working for yourself as well. So in most jobs, you can just do whatever your manager tells you to do. So as long as you perform the tasks you are paid to perform, and you do those to the best of your abilities, it's fine. But in academia, as a PhD student and as a postdoc, your results directly affect your future opportunities. So let's say your advisor gives you a lot of projects that doesn't work and he can't really advise you and he wastes a bunch of your time, and you have ambitions to stay in academia and eventually become a professor. Now you're not publishing, and that's no longer an option for you because you didn't publish, you didn't perform, and so now you no longer have that option. So your results directly translates into your future opportunities. Whilst for the professor who makes the projects, he has a lot of other PhD students and postdocs who also do research for him. So as long as someone is producing results, it doesn't really matter that much to him if you are. And so his risk is spread out over a lot of people, whilst your risk for yourself is much greater. Another important aspect is that if you're a PhD student, you have to get your degree. And your advisor is basically the one who decides whether or not you get your degree. If you don't get your degree in a PhD program, all that work was for nothing. And this kind of grows as you progress in your PhD, because the longer time you spend in the program, the more time you will have wasted if you don't actually get your degree. And so the power your advisor has over you is increasing as you go along, the deeper you go into the program. Whilst in a regular job, you can, at least in theory, just quit and get another job and it won't have any negative consequences to you. Another thing that really affects the power dynamic in academia is, especially as a PhD student, a lot of people who start the PhD have limited life experience, and so they don't know necessarily what's acceptable behavior and what's not in the workplace. There's also been created a narrative that as a PhD student, you should be overworked and underpaid, and you should be ready to be abused, basically. And this narrative also really affects the power dynamic, as a lot of people think that they have to work all these hours, they have to do all these things, because otherwise you're not hardcore or you're not cut out to be a PhD. And a lot of students who start their PhD admires professors and their advisors specifically because they have achieved the things that they dream of achieving. But what you have to realize is that this person is just a human. They're not anything special. They just know a lot, or at least hopefully they just know a lot about the thing that you want to learn a lot about. Another thing that really contributes to this power imbalance is that universities often invest quite a lot in professors, and professors bring them grant money. So oftentimes, most of the time, universities actually make money off of professors, whilst PhD students are viewed as purely an expense by universities. Of course, no research would ever get done without students and postdocs, but it still means that the university will, in most cases, take the side of the professor in a conflict. And so if the professor is to be reprimanded or even removed from his position, what he does needs to be very bad. And this really creates an insane power dynamic. So it seems like professors can get away with almost anything, and they are gonna be protected no matter what. And so if you're someone who really wants to bully people and own people and make people's lives miserable, there really isn't a better job than professor, I think. And so in reality, this is a dream job for a psychopath. And of course, by psychopath, I don't mean a clinical term. I mean someone with a high degree of narcissism and a low degree of empathy. And that's why I think you'll find a lot of people who have had negative experiences during your PhD, because this job seems to attract quite a lot of these kinds of people, or at least it can create an environment where these people, or people with these traits gets exaggerated because they're in an environment where they're idolized and they have kind of ultimate power and they can do whatever they want. And maybe some of these traits gets enhanced by this environment. So if I was to give advice on how to avoid these people as a student, I would say, if you see this kind of behavior, if you see traits like this, don't mistake it for ambition or that it's some kind of behavior to admire. Because I've seen people really burn themselves on this before. I've seen professors who are clearly not a nice person, and people still choose them as their advisor because they think that it tells them something admirable about them. And what often ends up happening is that they either switch professors or they drop out of the program entirely. That's the first and most important advice, I would say. Another thing is, don't idolize your advisor. Just because someone is a professor, it just means that they probably knows a lot about something. It doesn't mean that they're perfect in every aspect of life. And it doesn't mean that you should necessarily listen to them when they're talking about things outside of their specialty area. So yeah, don't idolize them. Don't think of them as a god. They're just a human being. And they're not perfect. And finally, I will say this, that you may think that they have this ultimate power and that they can just fire you if you're not living up to expectations. The fact of the matter is, in most cases, you're actually employed by the university and they don't have any direct way of firing you. Another thing is that they would, in most cases, be stupid to fire you because you are very cheap labor in most cases. And at least here in Scandinavia, the money that they have are allocated to you. So if they fire you, if you get fired, that project is gone. They can't hire anyone else on that money. So it's like, that would be a complete waste for them. And so even if the culture in the group is to work 80-hour weeks, that doesn't mean you have to. And as long as you produce as much as you'd expect, as you should be able to expect, and in most cases, a lot of the time, you'll be able to produce just as much as the others, working fewer hours, because people may not want to admit it, but in many cases, you work less efficiently if you are going beyond the limit of what you can recover from. So if you're working 80 hours a week, maybe you're not producing for much more than 40 hours. Now, a lot of people will claim that this doesn't apply to them, but at least in my experience, it applies to me, and I never felt like I was producing less than people who were working a lot more than me. Of course, your advisor can make your life miserable, so you should try to keep them as happy as you can, but don't burn yourself out by letting them abuse you. Okay, but I think that's all for this video. If you want to watch some of my other content, it's all there, and I'll see you in the next one.